Does the country that buys the format have the ability to change it as much as it wants?
Yeah, can the writers in the next, I keep referring to the United States, but can the country receiving it adapt it as they see fit? Or maybe it's an individual.
David, that's actually that's probably your question, isn't it? I mean, what's the level of there's a lot of good faith involved, I'm sure. I mean, Ricky Gervais, when he sold The Office, said, you did that deal, David, so you could speak to it. But he basically said, it's yours, do whatever you want.
And then they wound up, because the property was so strong.
Go above.
Because the property was so strong. I mean, let me back up for a second. The answer to the question, which is a good one, is it's a matter of contract. And there are people that, when I brought over Ugly Betty, which was from Colombia, they didn't want, they asked, they meaning the Colombian, I represented the Colombian rights holder. They wanted script approval. You know, this was a show for ABC that Disney did. We want approval over all the scripts. Disney's not going to agree to that, but what you will see often is contractual provisions that say that the rights holder will have approval over substantive changes to the format. And they want to, for them, the rights holder, Ugly Betty's a good example, or Millionaire, these are global properties. Ugly Betty, or Betty La Fea, as it's known in Colombia, is just literally just Ugly Betty. Betty the Ugly. But it's important to them. For the most part, when a rights holder is selling their format rights into a country, the deal is such that let's use the US buyer really only has the right to do a US version. They can sell that US version to France or Germany or the US or Canada if they want, but in terms of producing original episodes, they can only produce their US show. And the Colombians are going to go do a deal with someone in France to do a French show and in Germany to do a German show. So they need some sort of protection, if you will, their global brand. So they try as much as possible to try to keep some sort of creative approval. It's hard. I mean, the guys who are on this panel with me, they're creative guys. They can see the essence of a great story in an Israeli property. And if they're lucky, 80% of it will translate or 90% of it will translate. But that's usually not the case. It's 60%. I'm just picking a number out of a hat, but it's something less than 100%. And for someone like Howard to be interested in a drama or David to be interested in a comedy, they have to be able to sort of put their own, imprimatur on that property. Otherwise, they're just not interested. There are people that will just, even though The Office has a the American showrunner of The Office is a very talented guy, also represented by their agency. The very first episode of the American Office, almost indistinguishable from the British version. Not because Ricky Gervais said, well, that's how it's got to be, but because it was good. And because, it happened to be a British format, so there wasn't much to convert. The sensibility was there. But it is very much, particularly with the game shows, some of the bigger companies, the BBCs, the Granadas, go out of their way to protect their trademark, their brand, if you will, so they can go market that brand, and that brand retains its meaning in 100 or 100 plus countries around the world.
There's one.
Subtitled. These are not shows. I mean, they're done in the native language, the indigenous language, let's say. They're not subtitled because it's hard to interpret comedy, for example, with a subtitle.
Oh yeah, I mean
it doesn't work.
It doesn't work, and you couldn't do a show like Seinfeld or Mad About You, which is all about witty repartee. It's lost. And these guys can speak to it better than I can. I should just go ahead and hand over the mic. I can speak to it from a business point of view to say that these are subjects that come up, sort of creative approvals of the showrunner and the ability to change the format. But as I said, more often than not, if you want the top American showrunners and writers to work on these shows, you gotta let them do what they do. You know, there's a value in what they do. And sometimes it's not a match. Certainly deals have fallen apart over these issues, of the creative rights issues. We want to take it in this direction, and the rights holder goes, well, that's not a direction we want to go, and we won't do business with it.
And there's also a, one second, there's also just a technical problem, which is that for most, the order patterns in most countries are not as large as ours in the United States. So that they might do, I mean, there are a total of, what were there, 12 episodes of, Israeli episodes of In Treatment. You know, Americans want to do 100 episodes. So you quickly run out of the source material, same with The Office. And so you're forced to, even if you were completely respectful towards the original material, you know, you run out of stories before half the season's over in the United States.
So, I mentioned the show Nayor's Friends, which we're trying to set up here, and Howard said a word that, you know, maybe flew by, but is so, I think it's so right, and that's trust. So, you know, there's this show that, you know, Oded shared with me, Nayor's Friends. I was just knocked out by it. It's so incredibly brilliant. But there's a complication where they're trying to set it up here that I don't need to get into, but it's not, I can't just get someone who speaks English and Hebrew to translate it from Hebrew to English and we can put it on the air here. It won't work. So it needs to be adapted. There needs to be, I need to put my, not because I have an ego, because I know it won't sell as a straight adaptation. So I've been talking back and forth with Nayor, and Nayor's answer was, well, why don't you just make it take place in Brooklyn? I said, well, that's a location. That's not going to fly. I can't just pitch it as it's Nayor's Friends in Brooklyn. And I said, this is what I think is going to work. And he said, well, I personally, I don't think that's the best way to do it. But he did say, I trust you that you know what will give it the best chance to sell here while maintaining the integrity of the show. And it's because we do have this trust with each other. He knows that I'm crazy about this show. And I wouldn't do anything to change it for any reason than I think it gives it the best chance to succeed here. You know, you sort of, you know, I know Howard also has a relationship with the creator of the Israeli show. He's a part of his show, and he'll be a part of our show. And you really, if you're lucky, then you do have this connection and this trust because you care about the material so much.
I have something to say about that. I just want to say I'm going to use the word shidduch because it's really like a shidduch between the creator in Israel and the showrunner writer here. And it's sometimes the shidduch is like, listen, you really got to do the dishes and I'll be out there. But you know, different things. Different relationships. One relationship that I was aware of, you know, as a car, you know, was like really like an accident. We went to speak with the head of CBS, really nice Jewish lady. What's her name? I forget. Do you remember? Nina Tasser, right? And she mentioned the X list, which you saw a clip from here, and she said the problem was that the writer that we had here didn't really like the show.
It wasn't me.
Yeah, it wasn't David or Howard, and she said like maybe, you know, it didn't really, well, to be more exact, didn't really understand the things that I felt were strong in the Israeli show, and that's why it didn't transfer, was her opinion, to the American version, and actually failed, and they put it down after half a season. I think not, you know, I think some shows are easier to you know, migrate, see, it's a word, from Israel to here, like In Treatment. I mean, it's two people sitting in a room, you know, that's an easy adaptation. Homeland, I think it's not the obvious, Chatufim is not the obvious show to be translated here at all. I mean, when Gidi actually told me about that when he was doing it, I mean, I thought that was an amazing idea for an Israeli show, and I was like, as an American show, you know, because there's all that, I think part of the ratings that it got in Israel, because it was so sensitive, you know, it was still living this issue of the, you know, people who are in captivity, and and I think, quite honestly, it's why maybe it was picked up and became a series, because Avnir thought, you know, other than it being good, that people would really, people discuss this, people really go through this and live this day to day. We every day hear, oh, maybe there's going to be a deal with the Germans to free Gilad Shalit, and then, so it's not obvious, so I guess, a lot of changes have to go into this, but I think in the end of the day, what people need to realize, it's not a copy-paste. It's never going to be like, oh, Google's going to come up with this version of, translate this script to American version. It's never going to happen. It's about the shit between the Israeli creator and the American writer.